right. We're getting this thing rolling. What's up, guys? Just going to kind of hang here for a minute, get this thing started, and get a couple people joining us. Get myself situated, too, while we're at it so I can see all your comments. Oh, my gosh. We already got a super chat from Ty. Thank you, Ty. My applause button not working? Huh. Interesting. All right. We'll have to mess with that down the road. Hope everybody's doing good. Give me just a couple minutes here to get this thing situated, and we shall get rolling in no time. Yeah, how's everybody doing today? There we go. There we go. See, the comments are starting to roll in. And I mentioned this before, but I'm curious to know where you guys are listening from. It is interesting that we can do this, that we can basically have this conversation, me and all of you, at 10 a.m. on a Monday morning, at least 10 a.m. here, Eastern Standard Time. I'm sure it's going to be a little bit different for all you guys. Let's see. We are going to show all utility windows. Boom. There's my comments. Oh, wow. We already got a bunch of comments going here. Brian Nasser, thank you as well for the super chat. Appreciate you, man. Dude, I really appreciate you. I believe you're competing again here. Whew. We got a bunch of people already chiming in. I saw we did have a couple questions here. Dalton, thank you for joining us, brother. Angry listener, I know who you are. What's going on, man? Good to have you here, brother. All right. I'm just going through, and I am trying to put a note next to anything that you guys already put in before the show. Thank you, Ty, for the super chat. I appreciate you. Let me try that applause one more time. There it is. I couldn't hear that the first time. It's kind of silly that we have these buttons, right? I think I have this one too. Maybe I shouldn't hit that one. How far in? We're 2 minutes in. I can hit it.
Fuck off, Scott.
That's my Dave button. And I also have a Dusty.
Ring the bell.
There we go. Yeah. So let's see here. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me get back to the comments here and see what you guys are up to. Dalton, I see you had a question, so I already put a note next to that. Hoping to say hello to you at Masters Nationals if you're in the audience. So I did have a guy that was doing Masters Nationals, and then he ended up dropping out. You know the way people are. I don't know what the deal was. Diet was going good. I think his wife or girlfriend got laid off, and then all of a sudden he was solely responsible for all the bills. And then he was like, "Yeah, I can't do it, man." So we parted ways from there. But he was doing good. What's up? Angry Listener is in New York, upstate New York, and then we've got Justin over in Orange County, California. So it's pretty early over there. We got Birmingham, Alabama from the Lolly. The Lolly's like 265, 270 right now, and he's looking pretty big. Like you can see all the abs, lines through his quads. He's looking good. What's up here? Dalton is actually from Portugal. Oh, but you're moving back to the U.S., so you're in Portugal now. Okay, cool. Good morning from Jazzy. What's up? Sorry, I had to do the accent. And we have, oh, wow, England. What's up, Jake? Thanks for joining us from England. And, hey, thanks for all your comments always, man. You know, a lot of you guys are freaking awesome. All the comments that you guys give on, well, like the live streams, of course, but all the regular shows, even if you're just saying, hey, great show, or hey, good to watch, or, tell us what you think. Even if you don't have a lot to say, just that interaction helps us out a lot, because then YouTube says, oh, this channel looks like it's popular. So, we'll put it out in front of more people, so it helps us out. And Jove is in Finland. Heck yeah, man. I'd love to visit Finland at some point. Tanya Miller's with us. What's going on? We got Colorado with us, Alexandria. Oh, wow. Mount Joy, PA. I've only been to Pittsburgh. I liked Pittsburgh. That's where I'd been to North Americans. And then I have family from Pittsburgh. I was there as a kid. We're going to get started in just a minute, guys. So let's see. We got another question here. So I'm going to put a note next to it that we get back to it. Tuning in from Minnesota, keeping me distracted from my from actually working. Hey, no problem. You can get both done, right? Ooh, Newfoundland. I'd love to get up to that part of Canada. That would be cool. Denmark. Whoa, what's going on? This is like super international, including Florida and the middle of Georgia. Wow. All right. North Carolina. What's going on, Kevin? Good to have you here, man. Let's see here. In fact, speaking of Kevin, I've got a really great transformation. I should probably pull that up, give him a shout out. Let me see if I can do that. I think he asked me to collab in a post. So if I just go straight to, let's see, if I go straight to my page itself on Instagram, which if you guys don't follow me, you want to follow me over at Instagram, I'd be happy to have you. Let's see here. So here is, now I can post this now because Kevin posted it. This is public knowledge. Let's see here. Here's a picture of Kevin. 1 year in, we're working together on this, and he is down 100 freaking pounds. Now that is an incredible transformation. And not only is it an incredible transformation, like, hey, it looks great on Instagram kind of thing, but this is the kind of transformation that legit is going to change your life. Meaning like a decade from now, you're still being able to like run around. You hopefully will have turned around some really serious, morbidity stuff that could go on with being, extremely heavy. I will say this, that I do have a warning too, to anybody who's made a transformation like this. Just because you've gotten into shape now doesn't mean that you've escaped the last decade of having, or longer, of not having been in shape. And I have seen situations where sometimes guys get in good shape and then they just get that bug, right? And then they're like, now I want to get as big as I can. And they start hitting the gear just like any normal, anyone else would want to do, right? But they have kind of a pretty poor health history behind them, even though they might not look like it anymore. And I've seen situations where, now this person is in like dire straits as a result of gear use, because they already had a lot of stress on their body. Now, I'm not saying that's Kevin at all, but that's one thing, that we have talked about. One thing I have warned him against, like, hey, moving forward, because I want him to be able to stay in shape the rest of his life now and continue to get better. We're not done yet, but, keep that stuff in mind, that don't lose the plot. You know what I mean? The plot is to be your absolute healthiest, be your absolute best, and to hopefully be able to be around long term, see your kids grow up, see your kids graduate, get old, and then have them take care of you. I don't have any kids, so that's not going to happen on my end. I don't know what's going to happen. But that's another sad story. Back to the stream here. So yeah, we got Kevin. He's from Detroit. We've got Houston. I'm going to have to get moving in a minute. Toronto. What's up, Toronto? Love you guys up there in Canada. Scottsdale, Arizona. Hell of a place to be. I've never been, but I've only heard good things about it from Dusty and everybody else I know out there. Do you get out to Dusty's gym? I forget the name of it. Muscle Factory. That seems like the place to be. Peyton's with us. What's up, Peyton? Just put out a great reel. I got to get that one up. He makes a lot of reels for us. If you guys need any video content edited, ask him for help. So anyway, I do have a bunch of stuff going on. All right, I got to stop, guys. I got to stop looking at the comments. You guys are freaking awesome, though. All right, somebody else is in Mount Joy, PA. Huh? Yeah, we got more than one person in Mount Joy, I guess. All right, let's see. All right. Anyway, let's get down to this. So for anybody who is tuning in that hasn't tuned in to our content before, my name's Scott McNally. I've been coaching in bodybuilding full-time now for the last decade, but I've been coaching about 15 years altogether. And what I've tried to do with this channel is bring together a bunch of people to share various perspectives of people who have had a lot of success, people that are respected in our industry, so that we don't necessarily preach to you and tell you this is exactly what you need to do, but more so we get you thinking, we give you ideas so you can listen to what each of us has to say, see how those things apply to you, and then make your own decisions. That's learning versus just being told you must do this, you must take this, you must diet this way, because there is so many different ways to do it. When I first started coaching, I knew one way, and I knew that this is the way it had to be. And over time, I've come to learn that there are so many ways to get the same thing done. So there's a lot of flexibility in dieting and in bodybuilding. And if one aspect or one way of doing things isn't working for you, be open-minded that there is going to be another way. The key is being open and being creative. That comes down to the diet, that comes down to the training, and then the more advanced stuff like PEDs, it also relates to that too, because there's going to be compounds that some people do better with than others. So it's a matter of, in all of these regards, finding the things that work for you and then leaning into those things and getting the most out of them, I've got a bunch of stuff that I do want to talk about, and I am going to take your listener questions. So feel free to comment with questions, and I'm going to sift back through. I have a few of them lined up already, but there are a few things I want to hit, and I have a main topic. And this main topic is because I spend a lot of time reading your comments, right? Like that's the way I feel like I can stay plugged in with what you guys want to hear and with where you're at, right? And I can't claim to be perfect at it, but that's what I try to do. And one of the things that I notice we have issues with a lot is that we are all coming from different places. We have different goals. We have different end sights in mind. Like what do we want to achieve with this? So one of the areas that I end up seeing a lot of I guess arguing or confusion might be a better word. It comes down to performance enhancement, because we'll come on and we'll talk about a specific situation and say, in this case, this guy should do X, Y, and Z. And somebody else comes in and says, oh, I would never do that. That's too much. Well, what are your goals, and what is your experience level too? All of those things play into it. So I want to talk about the spectrums of performance enhancement today. And I thought that would be a really great way to get into this, and that we could probably, as podcasters on my end, do a better job. And I've been trying to do better at this, at laying out the specifics. If we're going to talk about doing some type of performance enhancement, like I want to get specific as in who does this answer apply to, So I wrote down some notes. I'm going to turn to those to kind of get this thing rolling. And like I said, it's going to be about the levels of enhancement. In the first place is what we would call therapeutic. Pure therapy with TRT would be keeping your test in that normal range, right? And, with that, you're probably not going to experience many side effects. If you have your testosterone literally replacing what your natural testosterone would have done, then the need for AIs, the need for controlling estrogen, the chances of your cholesterol getting thrown out of whack, the chances of your blood getting super thick, those things are not really going to be as big of a deal for you. It's that, basically when we use testosterone as the hormone that it is, the same hormone that's in our body at the same doses that our body naturally produces. And I'm not talking about the average. I'm talking about you as an individual, because there is a wide range. And I will say this, I've seen guys who are on a scale of 1,000, say, I've seen guys that are at 450, low end being like 300, 350. I've seen guys at 450 and they're doing great, like they would have never guessed that their test was at the lower range. And then I see guys that are right at that top end and like they have trouble gaining muscle. So test dose does not equal results. We all have a unique response now. And I'm talking about natural guys, like guys that are naturally at 450, guys that are naturally at 900, But there is benefit, though, to being on a TRT dose, even at that level. And I'll put it like this, that, you know, when we're dieting or any changes that we make, your testosterone levels, all your hormones will be affected. You know, as stress hormones go up, as your sleep gets bad, things like that, those things, they're going to affect your testosterone levels. Your nutrition obviously is going to affect your testosterone levels. And let's say that we had you on a therapeutic dose of testosterone, and that's all you want. You know, no need for AI, no need for any secondary anabolics. You know, cholesterol is good, hematocrit staying in range. Yet let's say you're in a dieting situation and we want to get you down to contest conditioning. Now, we can be ensured that your test levels are not going to fluctuate. Like, we have a nice, stable, even introduction of exogenous testosterone through the entire diet, right? So we've kind of trumped what your body would naturally do. So, you know, there's going to be a benefit. And what are the drawbacks? We all know the drawbacks of testosterone, that, you know, if you stay on testosterone long enough, if you're in need of TRT, or even if you're not, because I've seen guys that get to TRT clinics, they had good testosterone, yet the doctor tells them, yeah, hop on, it's great. It's a great ride. I got another super chat from Steve. I'll get back to you, Steve. Thank you. Long-term, it creates dependency, right? That means that for the rest of your life, whether you're in bodybuilding or not, you are going to depend on an exogenous drug, meaning that when you're 60 and you're traveling, you have to have testosterone with you. When you're 80, you know, and you're doing whatever you do when you're 80, you're going to need your test shot. When you're in a nursing home, you're going to need your test shot, you know. And so there is a lifelong dependency on medication. And of course, that's something that you have to determine for yourself. Now, if you already are low and you need replacement, then to me, it's a no-brainer. It's kind of like, you know, if you can't get those levels up, if there's no reason that they should be low, like you've worked on diet, you've, you know, done everything you can, and they're still low, and you can't fix it, then yeah, it's kind of like saying if you're a diabetic, you should take insulin. Absolutely, you know. Now, from there, we get into like the next segment, and I feel like a lot of you guys live in this segment, and that is what I would call optimized, you know, and that's, I think, where a lot of the TRT clinics come in. You know, TRT clinics are not looking to just replace your natural test. They want to tell you to be optimized. They want you to, you know, let's bring you up to the top end, and, you know, from there, with the top end, will you be able to recover better and grow more muscle? Honestly, for me, it's been hard to tell. Like, but I will say this, yeah, probably. And with an optimized level, though, there do come more risks, right? Because that's where we start to see more adulteration of cholesterol. That's where we see blood thickness start to become a situation. And that's where we may see some level of high levels of test now are converting to higher levels of estrogen. And we have to at least be aware of that. We may not need to manage it, but we need to be aware of that. And generally in this state, people are still looking to do this year round, you know? So we have the therapeutic, which is just like legit. This is just as the body behaves, that a healthy body behaves. And then we have the optimized, where now, you know, we're getting into a little bit higher ranges. And usually this is still going to be with bioidentical hormones, as people are calling it nowadays. Testosterone is going to be the main thing, right? But you may find some small need for estrogen control if you start to get so high that the estrogen is causing you issues. Can you run high estrogen and not use an AI? Absolutely. But there is going to be more risk of complication, right? So like I said, I feel like a lot of you guys live there, and then even more of you live in the next stage that we'll call TRT plus. Now that is like optimized plus a little. And here's where I think a lot of the arguments start to arise in our comment section, because optimize is one thing. TRT plus, it starts to become a murky gray area. A lot of times with TRT plus, we are going outside of the range. So if your normal range is 1200, guys are looking to run it at 13, 15, and then maybe put a little bit of something else sprinkled in on top of that. And a lot of times guys are looking to do that longer term too, be it, let's throw in 100 deca, or, let's throw in a small dose of Anavar. And these things are definitely going to enhance performance. We've had the debate on the podcast, what's a good Anavar dose? And that's a great example of, well, how does it fit into where your level of optimization is, right? Because there's going to be some people that their levels are going to, or their idea of what they want to achieve is a lot higher end. So if you are in a further stage up, you may say more, but if you're in this stage, like the TRT plus stage, then maybe 5-10 milligrams is all you need, And it's interesting because Vigorous Steve kind of opened my eyes to this one, because I had a discussion with him. I've mentioned it on the shows before. He had done a podcast about 5 milligrams of Anavar is all you need. And I'm thinking, well, what? 5 milligrams of Anavar, but then I talked to him about it. He was like, well, yeah, a lot of the guys that are watching my content aren't looking to be like crazy enhanced juice monkeys. They're looking to, keep it at, just a standard, high end TRT plus kind of thing like we're talking about here. Now, dosing is pretty much going to be low end cycles, right? Like that's kind of what we're talking about here. And generally, whatever you're doing isn't something that you can maintain year round. There are points that I would still suggest, like, hey, let's pull this back a little bit. So, I do think, though, a lot of you guys are living in that TRT plus phase. There is kind of some murkiness, like I said, though. And from there, we get into enhanced. So technically, if you are on TRT plus, I will consider that enhanced. But then there is no question about it, I am on a cycle level of enhanced, right? And that's going to be a lot of the stuff that we talk about on this channel. Like, you are legit enhanced if you're running 300 tests. You are legit enhanced if you're running 150 tests with 300 primo. Like, that is an enhancement. That is, to me at least, beyond TRT plus. That is like legit cycle doses. That's not something you can, maintain for the rest of your life. But that said, this isn't a place of judgment either. This is just trying to define these different levels so that you can determine what level you're in, and then also consider, well, how is that different from what some of the other levels may be? Enhanced is full on cycles, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, maybe 20 weeks. Our need for lab work, I think, goes up a lot higher once we get into that TRT plus stage, because we are looking out. We can run TRT plus stuff longer, but we need to keep our eye on labs. So maybe you have an idea of adding that 5 milligrams of Anavar in, as Dave would say, crack on. But hey, give it 6 weeks. Look at where your labs are. What will it affect? Anavar is going to potentially affect your cholesterol, minor liver stuff, right? Especially at 5 milligrams, it's not going to do much, but you want to keep an eye on those things. And if you are running a little bit more tests, then definitely watch your hematocrit, so high hematocrit isn't the demon that we once thought it was, but that doesn't mean that there aren't complications that come from it, especially if you start getting symptoms. We're going to get into that in a little bit. I have a refresher here on the blood pressure machine, because a lot of you guys freaking got on board with running your blood pressure after we talked last. I thought that was freaking awesome. So yeah, we have enhanced, and as we get into that enhanced range over time, those doses grow, So somewhere in there, we get into my next stage that I'm going to call nuclear enhanced, chemical warfare. And you might never reach that stage, but if you keep increasing a little here, a little there, ultimately those doses end up going from milligrams into grams, and that's where real health issues can arise. And that's what we've seen, especially over the last decade or so, there was a time when people, I think, were a lot more careful. And then there were some ideas that came out about like, hey, maximize everything you can, take as much as you can. Look at me, I'm doing fine. And then we started seeing people, unalive after doing that for, a good chunk of time. And there always have been health consequences in bodybuilding. And we need to recognize that. I think to some degree, those health consequences potentially can exist with any of these levels. You know what I mean? Obviously, each time you step up, the more risk you do take. Somebody recently said in our comments, yeah, but what's the opposite is just stay in your house and be afraid of the world. We can't do that. There is some level of risk in life, but it's calculated, right? And we want to definitely be safe, and we want to think about our futures too. Here's the thing is that over the years as a podcaster and content creator in general, I've seen our listeners pass away at times. Like we've lost listeners. And to me, that is heartbreaking. It really is. And, a lot of times it hasn't had anything to do with, chemical enhancement. But thing is that I would hate to see a decade down the road, any of you guys reporting in that your kidneys are failing from something you were doing. I want you guys to be as safe as possible. So, in that level of like nuclear, that's where we get people who comment in the shows saying like, well, why would you ever suggest 300 tests? 300 tests isn't going to do anything. You know what I mean? You got to run it at a gram. So be careful with where you're at, because you might be in an earlier stage. You might be in the enhanced, the standard enhanced, the not nuclear, and somebody else is telling you to run a gram. You just know where you're at and respect that place, and don't push things too far too fast. If you can use the least amount possible to get the most out of it, then I think you're doing the best you can. So anyway, I am over with that rant, and I am going to jump back to see what the questions are. Let's see, and see what your comments are too. Scott says, you have 2 kidneys for a reason. Oh, so are you telling us that you can push it really hard and once you lose one, or are you saying you have 2 so that you can donate one of them to another listener when he needs it? I don't know which that is. Yo, Scott, good morning. Skipped work and am at the gym. Gabe, what's up? Another client of mine. Good to see you, man. I can't believe it. I do not approve of skipping work, guys, whatsoever. If you are at work right now, that's okay though. You just ride this out for the next hour. It's your boss won't mind. In fact, you've been working extra hard. You deserve to spend a little time on the podcast. Dalton coming in with the super chat. All right, man. I see. Thank you very much for that, man. Let's see. Wanted to add this to my question as an option because I originally forgot. Option 3 for my cycle, leverage, test, and AI. Okay, we will get back to that. Scott says you can trash one kidney, no big deal. What's your take on SUS 250? I'll get back to that one then, because there are a couple other things that I wanted to make sure we talked about here. What's up, Zionic? Happy to have you here, man. Optimal level of total and free to build muscle. Is it always the higher the better, diminishing returns? So that's related. Why don't I take that one right now? Man, it does vary, Obviously, high free test is going to be a good thing, right? But I can't put a number on it because, like I said, I've seen guys who naturally have like 450 test. But if you looked at them, you would have guessed that their test was through the roof. And then I've seen guys that are lower test, and then we say, oh, we get you on, maybe we have a guy that's 325 and he's always felt low T, right? And then we get him on TRT and we think like, oh, initially years ago, I'd think like, oh man, there's going to be a game changer. We get this guy's test levels up and it's going to be lights out. We get his test levels up and guess what? He tells me like, I really don't notice a difference. I really can't tell, I guess I get a little bit more energy, but I can't really tell that. Like I've literally had those cases. So, where's the diminishing return? It's hard to say, man, because like I said, everybody's so individual. But I would say this, if you start with the least, and you work your way up, you find what that minimal baseline is for you, and that's where I would go with anybody that I worked with. Is we just kind of start out by seeing, well, where are they? What have they done? And we try to get the most out of the least we can. So let's say that a guy is on TRT and he wanted to move it up to TRT plus. It might be as simple as adding a little bit more test and seeing how he feels, seeing how he responds, seeing how his body responds. Like, is he getting stronger? Is he better utilizing nutrition? That kind of stuff. So, but it's hard to say. Tren isn't prescribed to humans. Primo is prescribed to women at 1 gram per week. Is that true? I don't know about that. Maybe your vitals are labeled wrong. Oh, I think he's talking to somebody else there. All right. Like I said, I do have some questions, and there are a few things I wanted to mention. And one thing I did want to make sure that we touched on today was the blood pressure machine. Because the blood pressure machine, let's see, I'm going to go to this. I have to hit this button here. And now I am going to go to this page here. All right. This is going to give me a place to start. So just real quick, and just a quick reminder, blood pressure machines. All right. I was surprised by how many of you guys aren't using or weren't using a blood pressure machine regularly. So this is the one I use. And because I am a normal size human or getting close to it, my wife tells me, you still have muscle, babe. I can fit into the normal cuff. My arm is just about, I think we measured it the other day to see how it fit, and it was like 16 and a half, 17. And this, I believe, goes to 17. So I put a link, and it is an Amazon affiliate link. If you don't have a blood pressure cuff, then you can buy one. That one came highly recommended, and it has both cuffs. It has the standard cuff, and it has the jacked cuff with it too. And it was a decent price. What you want to do, and I'm not saying you need to get that machine. That's down in the description though. But get yourself a blood pressure cuff if you don't have one. Check it first thing in the morning. Check it in the afternoon when you tend to be more busy, and then check it again in the evening, and do that regularly, okay? Because that will help to give you a baseline idea, because you can have high blood pressure and not even realize it. Everybody we hear of in bodybuilding who ends up having kidney issues, it was due to running high blood pressure. And you might not see that high blood pressure on your lab work until you actually are showing a problem, because you've had high blood pressure for quite a period of time. So you can catch it before the lab work by checking your blood pressure at home. I'm not saying you have to be that religious, but kind of, get it going. I'll run it, 3 times, 4 times a day for a few days. And then from there, I may back off. And then next week, I might check it once. And then if I notice that once during the day. And then if I notice that it is running higher, then I keep a closer eye on it. And I do what I need to do to get it corrected, including I take lisinopril. Personally, I keep it prescribed by my doctor. I think that with blood pressure medications, it is important to go through your doctor. I know there are a lot of places available, including some of our affiliates that we don't talk about on YouTube. But I would suggest, though, it's good to have this stuff, like a good dialogue with your doctor. There are blood pressure medications that can interfere with other drugs. So it's one of those things that I feel like having a legit medical opinion is good. And if you don't have a doctor you can trust, then let's back it up a couple steps and work on that. If you're in the US, you have no excuse, okay? Doctors today, they're literally like, you can go. So if you have insurance, which is obviously key, then you look your insurance up, you see the doctors that are going to be available in your area. And I know this takes work, but then you go to Google and you'll see Google reviews on each of these doctors, and you'll see their pictures, and you'll see what people have to say on them. And you can review them just like you would review the blood pressure monitors on Amazon. And you can kind of get a vibe for who you might want to pick. Go in, do an appointment with them, see what you think, be completely transparent with them, and let them know what you're doing. My doctor knows that any AAS talk we do, it's going to be off the record, but she does work with me and she understands where I'm at. And she helps me to monitor things. She's not going to help me by giving me the things that I, want, but, we do work with like where I'm at, which isn't nearly as enhanced as it used to be. So anyway, that would be my thought there on blood pressure machines. I did have a bunch more stuff that I wanted to mention. Let's see. So another topic we had here, and this is just my hot take on BAM 15. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about Cardarine versus SLU-PP332. Now, the prices I've seen on BAM 15 are pretty high. I don't know if you guys have experimented with it yet. It's not for me, just simply because of that price point. My thought is this, that I have not needed, and this might be an old school approach, but I haven't needed BAM 15 to get into shape, and that means that I can still do that with myself and others without having to spend the money that BAM 15 costs. Maybe you guys have a better connection than me, but just from what I've seen, and that includes like my own affiliate stuff, I'm just not a fan because it's just a high price point product. Now, I'm not saying you can't use it if you don't want to, but my personal opinion is that there are so many other options and so many other tools that we already have. I'm not going to promote something to you, just because it's popular, and be a conscientious consumer too. At the end of the day, I want to try to be as honest with you guys as I can. I only promote stuff that I would suggest, I don't know if everybody has the same, we all have our own motives, I guess, is what I'm getting at. And I'm not saying that every single person who's promoting an expensive supplement has, bad motives, but keep it in mind that, like, who are you getting the information from and what is their benefit in you using it? That includes everything, including the stuff I talk about too, and that said, that doesn't disqualify it just because somebody has an invested interest in a product, because I talk about stuff I have an interest in all the time. Heck, I just talked about a blood pressure machine and I said, here's an affiliate code, use the code or not, it won't affect my life. But if you do need a blood pressure machine and you do use the code, then it's going to give me some sort of a small bonus. I'll make like $1 or something. I don't even know. Right. So just keep that in mind though. When you hear about these new trends, new trends in, peptide supplementation, look at where's this information coming from and what is the person's reasoning for sharing it with you, And, it is a business at the end of the day. So, okay, we did get a good question here from Angry Listener. He asked, is the blood pressure monitor reliable? Is blood pressure monitoring with smartwatches reliable? The cuffs are definitely cheaper. So I have an Apple Watch, which my wristband needs to be washed because I thought I had BO one day. Technically I did because my wrist did. It wasn't me though, it was my watch. So that is put away for now until I get that washed really well. But I have the Apple, I think Ultra, I think it is. I bought it a couple years ago and I've tracked a lot of stuff on it and it's okay, but it doesn't do blood pressure. I will tell you this, even the at-home cuffs, they may be off. Now, from my understanding, I've been told that the wrist cuffs are better than they used to be, but traditionally getting the upper arm cuff has traditionally been more reliable. That doesn't mean that your machine is reliable, but here's what you can do. You can take it to your doctor. You can read it off of your cuff, read it off of their cuff, and that's what they call calibrating the machine. So if your machine is always reading 10 points higher than the doctor's machine, then you'll know how to adjust. You've calibrated it. You know that this machine is 10 points off. You'll know that you're actually 10 points lower than that. If it were, that far off, it might only be a few points. And also too, like I said, measure your arm, because when I was bigger, if they used the regular size cuff, my blood pressure would always be way higher. I've got stories of that. In fact, I had a doctor who told me, a nurse or assistant, she kind of was like, we don't have the big cuff in here. I was like, well, I'm going to tell you my blood pressure is going to be high. And she's like, well, let's try it and see. And of course it's through the roof. And then I forced her to walk 2 rooms down to get the other cuff. And she came back and reluctantly plugged it in and took my BP. And guess what? It was perfectly fine. So there's that. I didn't rub it in her face. What's up, Tina Carlson? Good to have you here. And yeah, so Tanya Miller says, no, the watches are not. I will tell you that my Apple Watch does not seem to be perfect. It's questionable in general. And I'm not just talking about this. I'm talking about just everything with it. I've known some people. In fact, I have a client, Paul, that is doing a test against 2 different watches. I think he has a Garmin and an Apple Watch. I know Scott Stevenson did like 3 of them back in the day, years ago, was testing each of these things against each other. I hear that the Oura Ring is pretty decent for, a lot of readings. I might try that next, but I wouldn't say, trust your life to it. Stinky Watch Band tip from customers who can't wash things easily. Spray with cheap vodka or rubbing alcohol and allow it to dry well. I do mine each time. Okay, take the Fitbit off and charge it. Works. Nice. All right. Good. Yeah, Scott says Apple Watch sleep tracking is a joke. So I do see some stuff that seems to be helpful. And I know that if I have a poor sleep, it definitely looks different than if I have a good night's sleep. But how perfect is it? How perfect is it recording my actual sleep? That's pretty hard to say. I'm more with you than not with you, Scott. So there's that. Currently trying to find a good. I'll take a couple questions here, and then I've got a couple more topics. Let's see here, though. So Rascal says, currently trying to find a good EQ to test ratio for myself. Do you have a good ratio for yourself? Now, I've seen a lot of differences between, different individuals. Generally, here's what I would do if you're looking for a good ratio, because listen to this too. I've seen some people that, let's just take test alone. I've seen a guy who will run 300 tests and he has no issues with estrogen. Estrogen's in the normal range. I've seen guys who run 500 tests and have no issues with estrogen. Estrogen's still even in range. Then I've seen guys that run 300 tests and they can't control the estrogen, right? So who are you to begin with? But if you wanted to try that out, my thought would be you already have an understanding of how test works, hopefully, right? And then I might run it at close to a 1-to-1 ratio, or maybe a little bit more test. Say 400 tests to 300, and this is just an example, 400 tests to 300 EQ, and then wait a month, get your labs done, and see where you're at. You'll already have known how 400 tests would affect you. Now you can find out what does 400 tests, 300 EQ look like, and then that would allow you to further adjust the dosing from there. It might mean for a slow overall start to this cycle, but after you have this cycle under your belt, you'll have a lot more information that you can then apply to future cycles. So I'll throw that at you here. Let's see. I'm going to keep scrolling up here. Give me just a minute, guys, because I'm reading as we go. All right. Let's get to Dalton's question. Dalton left us a super chat. And I think I have to scroll through 100 more questions to find out what the rest of his question was. He said, I wanted to add to my question, okay, as an option, because I originally forgot. Option 3 would be leverage test in AI, so higher test in AI, and add 4 units of generic growth. Now, let's see if I can search to find Dalton in here, because I'm not sure. Okay. So Dalton from Patreon, thank you for your support, brother. He says, just finished my first bodybuilding prep, reversing out and then going into a growth phase, starting first growth phase after. Was going to leverage test in food long as possible with AI. Okay. He says he's got a couple more posts here. I'm in this for the long haul, decade plus, and want to coach. So I do want to experiment with everything, but I'm wondering if I should just start off more basic, test plus EQ, or the fun option. What's the fun option? Let's see here. I'm going to add this. He's got a lot of comments. I'm not going to be able to get them all up here. And then I was going to add Primo, and then a bit of a pickle, right? But that's in a bit of a pickle right now. EQ is an option, but I was thinking about instead adding low dose VAR post workout. Just pre-workout, and then low dose Tren later in the cycle. So he's post-cycle now, or post-contest now. Judging by those striations in his delts, he's in really good shape. Now, Dalton, if you were to come to me and you were to share with me where you're at, the first thing I'd want to do is I'd want to look at your physique and decide, well, let's set some goals. What are the things that we need to improve? Let's look at how you did at the show. Then based off that, I would like to look at your training to see what kind of training has led to, let's say that you need to bring your back up. Everybody needs to bring their back up, right? So let's look at your back training. Let's see exactly what you've done over the course of the prep in the off season before that. And then let's figure out how can we adjust that along the way. Now, I get the vibe that you may not have been on anything yet post-cycle here. Like you did the prep and you maybe were, I'm not sure what you were doing during the prep. And that's a big factor too, because if you were going in all guns blazing, I'd want to know where your health markers are. Do you need to pull back and have any kind of a health phase? Well, if so, then we spend the next week or the next 8 weeks just really hammering in on that training and making sure that we're reversing out, yet most importantly, not getting you fat. We need to ride that insulin sensitivity up. And you could do that for a long freaking time. You just have to be patient and you have to have a lot of restraint because there's going to be some incredible appetite post-cycle. A lot of people end up taking themselves out. I did it a couple years, 3 years, 2 years in a row, 2 contest preps in a row. And then the third one, I finally started getting better. But ultimately, you really do, you don't want to get fat too soon. That's been the problem. Let's see. Okay, so Dalton, let's see. 500 test. All the way at the top of the chat. Yeah, we got to keep everything concise, Dalton, because it's hard for me to find your comments and questions spread through everybody else's. So if you were running just 500 test into the show, if you're healthy, man, you could keep running that through the post. I would run that for 8 weeks, but really the key is figuring out what do you need to do differently in your training to be able to get the gains that you want. That would be the first place that I would look. Adjusting that training, keeping the gear up. If you wanted to add a little EQ in, as long as your blood work looks okay, you could do that. NPP might be another option because we can get NPP in there fast and, exact some really quick anabolic stuff going on so that we can take advantage of it like right now, get that built up a little bit quicker, I think, in my experience, than getting that EQ built up. But yeah, if you wanted to add either in, I guess that would be okay. Growth hormone, I'll tell you what, if you can start the growth now and then continue riding that beyond this phase, because you're eventually going to have to take some sort of a break, right? And when the gear comes down, continue on that growth, 3-4 units a day, and continue focusing on that training. And ultimately, I want that focus to be on figuring out what you need to do in the gym to get the results that you need diet-wise while not getting you fat, through this rebound. And we should be able to keep you pretty lean for an extended period of time. I'll tell you that the harder you train, and I don't just mean like, hey, let's do more sets, but the better you train, I should say, and the more intensity you can use in your working sets, the more you're going to get out of food. So the less food you actually need to be able to make progress. I can tell you firsthand that at my ultimate best training, which was in my mid 40s, right? Imagine that guy who's used gear for a decade plus in his mid 40s, isn't really pushing food hard, just making sure I got protein in, right? And eating 5-ish times a day. Sometimes a meal might have even ended up being like ground turkey with a tortilla. The tortilla is 32 carbs. So, okay, flour tortilla, right? But I at 600 test, and I made the best back progress of my life because I figured out some major game-changing stuff in my back training to take that training to the next level, and I grew like a weed. So I really do believe that the training is the driver, then the food and the gear work together to help, give you as much as you can out of that. There was a couple other topics I wanted to make sure I hit, and I do want to make sure I get to all your questions. Let's see. Oh, we did get a question about gyno here. I watch every show with all the different guests. I love the show with Dave Crossland the most. I have always wanted to see a show live, but the time difference prevents me. So thank you for being here today. And I think that he had a question a little bit further on, because I have gyno, and lowering E2 and lowering prolactin didn't seem to affect the continual spreading of fatty tissue. All right. So I would imagine, sorry, I'm reading a couple more comments that he had put in. So, it's got to be the hormones that cause it. Now, fatty tissue, I think that that's a secondary thing. When we talk about gyno, we're talking about first and foremost the gland, usually, right? Now, that said, I think that you still have to, if you're gaining fat, there's going to be more fatty tissue. Like, I guess what I don't see is that if you've stopped the gyno, if you've arrested the gyno from growing, and let's say that you're completely shredded, but you have this stupid lump, right? I don't see fat deposit continuing to grow if that's been arrested. It may not get better. You may, in that gland, it will kind of expand and contract depending on where estrogen levels are. But I don't have a real good answer for you. I definitely, though, I'll say this. If you're not sure what's going on, then I would definitely pull the hormones down for now and figure it out and get that under control. Because generally it's taking your foot off. We can take our foot off the gas at any time, I remember back in the day when test and D-ball were like the thing that everybody did. Literally everybody in their off seasons, they did test and then they did test and D-ball. Like that was every cycle, right? So I remember back in the day though, that guys would say like, oh, I'm starting to get gyno. What should I do? My first, what nobody ever said? They didn't ever say, take your foot off the gas. They always just said like, oh, add some Nolvadex in, add this in, do that. Well, just skipping a dose of D-ball in that situation is going to be a world changer, right? Skip it for a couple days. You just stop introducing the reason that the gyno is happening. That would be the first and foremost thing that I would suggest. Now, if you have done that, let's say that you've got gyno and you've finished the cycle. We used to have a lot more talk about trying to get rid of that gyno by, just bombing the hell out of estrogen. Guys were running like 2.5 letro every day, plus, 20, 40 tamoxifen. And they would then report back, oh, the gyno's shrinking. I'm reversing it. But here's what, and maybe if it's super early on, you may have a chance, but everything that I've seen, once you've developed that gland and you have new built up tissue, that tissue will expand and contract much like a sponge, you know what I mean? With your hormonal situation. So you go back on cycle, and even if the gyno isn't growing, estrogen's a little bit higher, then the gland expands more, right? And if your estrogen's too high, then obviously it's going to continue to evolve and grow. But then you come back off and then that gland shrinks back down. So, I honestly, unfortunately, if you have gland there and it's noticeable, the only answer is to get it unfortunately cut out. Now, I'll be honest, I feel like every bodybuilder I know has some tiny level of gyno at some degree or another. Almost all of us do. And the question is it noticeable? If it's not noticeable, then so be it, then leave it. But if it is noticeable, the only answer is going to be, I think, to actually get it cut out. There's no spot treatments. Bringing your hormones down and absolutely destroying estrogen isn't going to be a long-term solution. And if you do need to get that operation done, I had liposuction on my chest. I didn't have glandular tissue, but as a teenager, I ended up developing what's called gynecomastia. I didn't understand what it was. It's like, my chest, I feel like I'm growing boobs basically. And I did get somewhat fat when I hit puberty. It was not a good look, but I noticed like sensitivity at the nipple. And if I had like a sweatshirt on that had like an emblem on it and it rubbed that nipple, halfway through the day, I'd be like, good God, my nipple hurts. I was like 12, 13. So I didn't tell my parents about this. I didn't say anything to anybody. I just never took my shirt off again. And, down the road, I got into bodybuilding and I learned about this. And then I started realizing like all the men on my dad's side have like thicker chests. Okay. Yeah. So I think there's a genetic thing, and it's something that my dad had experienced. And he told me a lot of my uncles had experienced. Thankfully, I did not have glandular tissue. And I went to a plastic surgeon and I literally had liposculpture done on my chest. And I paid for it out of my own pocket, just working my day job. This is after I came back from working in photography. I initially came back and I managed a warehouse at a place that I worked at while going through college. So I was like, oh, that's the first place I know. And so I worked there for a while and I got a job as a warehouse manager. And I spent, I think it was like $1,000 maybe to get the fat sucked out of my chest. And it did resculpt it and it looked great. Now, if you do have glandular tissue, I still highly suggest that you go to a plastic surgeon to get it done. Here's the thing. If you go to your regular doctor, you get a referral to somebody to remove it, it's most likely going to be a tumor specialist. That tumor specialist's job is to keep you alive. He's not there to keep your chest looking great on the bodybuilding stage. So you could end up with like a concave scoop taken out, and that's the last thing that you want. So you want to go to somebody who's also going to keep aesthetics in mind. Obviously it's going to be more than $1,000 that I paid. I believe that $5 about is the standard pricing. I could be wrong on that. It's been a little while since I had looked into it though, but I definitely hope that helps him. There are a few more things I wanted to mention here too. Make sure I get to this. You guys were asking about Cardarine versus SLU PP332. Now I'll tell you what, Cardarine is something that, years ago, I had definitely used my fair share of it, 25 milligrams, 10 to 25 milligrams. And I found that it definitely helped with fat loss, running it 6-8 weeks at a time. I also noticed some improved endurance. Now, dealing with a lot of autoimmune stuff after having caught a virus back in 2021, the beginning of 2021, I found that being an exercise mimetic and helping there, I do believe there is a mitochondrial boost from it. I found that Cardarine was very helpful with my breathing. And I found that it improved my endurance, but I found it to be extremely beneficial. So I had run Cardarine at low doses off and on in the past few years. Now that came to SLU PP332. I tried SLU, and for me, it was an absolute game changer. Like it blew everything else I had ever tried for like just basically boosting my energy levels, cutting the brain fog, and it just improving everything across the board, fat loss, energy, endurance. SLU for me was a massive step forward. So, fast forward to a month or two ago, and I decided, okay, I've been running this long term. I don't know if I'm getting the same amount I used to out of it. I'm going to take a break, right? So I pull it out, I take a break, and I thought to myself, what if I go back to Cardarine? I'm going to try a little Cardarine while I'm in my off period. I'll tell you what, it doesn't compare. It does, for me at least, it does not compare. Now, I've used Cardarine for other things. Recently Andrew on Blood, Sweat, and Gear talked about trying to run a health phase using some Cardarine in it. His goal was to boost his cholesterol, improve his cholesterol profile. And he had great success with it. I too have had great success with boosting my HDL. Keep in mind, your liver enzymes are going to get elevated with Cardarine. I've seen it firsthand. I think we saw it with Andrew's labs. I've seen it with others. But that said, though, you do get a boost. Now, is high HDL in itself going to mean that you're healthier? Yeah, there's definitely the verdict's out on that. That there's no link between improving HDL to like going outside and say using flushing niacin. It doesn't change morbidity rates. So that said, as Dave Crossland has mentioned, you know, if we know people with HDL that are high tends to be healthier and have less heart issues, then I would rather at least artificially do these things to bring it back up. So yeah, if you were looking to bring HDL up, I think that's a great place. In the past, when I've had endurance clients, guys that are, say, in MMA, you know, mixed martial arts or just fighting sports in general, which I've worked with a bunch of guys in that department. Endurance is the number one thing that we're looking for, and we need to be able to keep them fast. Cardarine has been a go-to in those cases, and we've had great success with it. I'll look forward to the next time I work with an MMA guy, what we get out of SLU, because I think for some people there may be even more benefit. Now, we were also asked about DADA and what my experience was. So I've been using some DADA. I believe it's 250 milligrams. Is it dosed by milligrams, guys? You tell me, because I can't remember offhand. But 250 milligrams. And I found that I get an extreme boost out of it. I've only used it intermittently. So my mainstay has been SLU. And then I find that on specific days, if I want an additional boost, I could go to a milligram of MOTC. I could go to a capsule of DADA, which is either 200 or 250 milligrams, I believe is what I'm taking. And I'm using that orally. Somebody mentioned that they had, I think, an injectable DADA. I don't know if our guys, our research places make that, but I've just gone with the oral, and I found that the oral DADA is extremely potent, but I'm definitely keeping it as a one-off. It's not something I would suggest running every day. In fact, I don't think it's a bad idea to break from SLU. You know, I'm back on it now. I definitely feel a huge boost from it again. Love the stuff. But what I'm doing is I'm running one cap in the morning at 250, then another later in the day. So it'd be like 6:37 in the morning, and then again at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But there are days then for maybe a week in a row that I might skip that second dose just to titrate down a little bit, you know, or I may take days off of it too. I'm not going to just run it consistently 7 days a week like I did in my first run. But you guys tell me, if you're watching the stream right now and you have experience with Cardarine as well as SLU, let me know which you found to be a better booster, both cognitively and endurance wise. And let's throw DADA in there too. I'd be curious to hear, because that's, you know, part of me learning about this stuff is through my own experimentation. Part of it is through talking to guys like Keith at Parabolic, and then part of it is listening to you guys. I hear a huge cross section of experiences by just listening to our comment section. It's kind of like we have our own experiments that are going on right here in the group, you know. Let's see. We got some more questions. I know I had some more stuff too, but I'll take some more questions here first. Joe says, I also had pseudogyno at a young age. After finally addressing my health, I lost close to 150 pounds. Had skin removal on my chest and stomach, and they removed the gland. $20K all out of pocket. Dude, I bet you feel and look like $1 million though, Joe. So it sounds like it was probably worth it, man. Let's see. We've got a question here. Let's see. I'm going to heart that one and come back to it. Let's see. You said that TRT Plus guys can add Proviron, Winnie, VAR, low dose Tren to look great for summer, July through August next year. Do you add compounds in May, June before, or July, August during, and which compounds? That's a great question. How do we set up a non-competitor's like summer looking great on the beach cut? So let's bring up a calendar here, first of all. And because that's what I always do. If I'm going to work with somebody on a project, I want to bring up a calendar. So I'm going to just screenshot, let's see, the year, and I'm going to bring this in. So let's look at this first. And let's look back. Let's say that you come to me in, we'll call it March. Sounds pretty reasonable, right? And you say, hey, I want to get into the best shape that I can, and I want to hold that look through the majority of summer. So it's March now. First of all, let's get that diet cracking, right? Because we have, maybe it's March 20th, we'll call it. We have another week in March, then we have all of April and May to really get cranking. And a big part of it's going to be how lean are you to begin with, right? How lean you are by the end of a diet. It really comes down to how lean were you when you started and how long did you take on the diet. But let's say that you're starting toward the end of March. And let's say that you already are a guy who runs test year round. You're either on TRT or TRT plus, or you are enhanced, or you're therapeutic, one of the terms that we came up with today. Even if you're nuclear, well, you're probably not nuclear if that's what your goals are. So we're going to obviously diet out the gate, April, May, and let's see. So that would be 4, 8, 12, 16. If we're going to keep the doses low and your health markers all look really good, I honestly wouldn't have a problem with you running a baseline of increased test from April through August. I'm just being completely transparent with you. Now, of course, we are going to want to get labs done, after 8 weeks. But let's say April and May, we just increase the test mildly. Once again, this is a non-competitor. This is somebody that, and this is a great place to be able to use our chart that we came up with here. This is somebody who's a non-competitor. This is somebody who is definitely, run cycles. They do get enhanced. So we are going a little bit more than TRT plus. Maybe we start test at 300 and we run that 300 test through April and May. Through the end of March, we're dieting. And then sometime in April, we start 300 test. We run that through April and May. And then into June, we're already getting into decent shape. That's where I would then consider adding in an additional compound, because really we're going to use the diet to do the majority of the heavy lifting. And now we're not turning the gear up until June so that we can extend this, because we're talking, this is a long cycle. This is 20 weeks, right? And after that, we are going to want to take a break. But yeah, why not, man? As long as you're staying healthy, we do labs throughout every 8 weeks would be good. So we have labs in March. We start dieting. April and May, you're on 300 test, which is obviously not crazy talk by any means. And then by June, we add another compound in. What were our options there? I wouldn't add the Winnie in yet. Honestly, if we did have access to a DHT like Masteron has been my go-to for the last decade for projects like this. So I would run 300 Mast probably to couple that with the 300 test. And we'd start that somewhere around the end of May into June. You're already looking good. We'd probably try to use, or as the new term is leverage, isn't it, guys? A lot of people are using the term leverage. We would leverage some Clen then around that June period. And you guys know the way I've run Clen, which is we start real low. Your diet's already working. When you're checking in with me, let's assume that you're getting 2 pounds per week, 2 pounds per week, 2 pounds per week. We add 20 micrograms of Clen on top of that. You're getting 2 pounds plus, 2 pounds plus, or we don't need to make changes. We can keep the food higher and you're still getting 2 pounds per week, 2 pounds per week. And we add the Mast in at 300, then maybe that's not going to stay that way anymore. But let's say MAST isn't available. We could run 300 EQ, and that's not necessarily going to give you a harder look. But we could also add in, say, I've heard now when we talked about Proviron, I felt like there were a couple people that said Proviron doesn't work. Maybe that's because Dave Palumbo put out a video that Proviron doesn't do anything. But I do believe it gives you a good hardening effect. I don't believe it's going to build any muscle, but you do get a harder, drier look out of it. And if we were to add some Proviron in at that point, in that June point, basically whatever we had going on, I'd like to add in something in June that is not necessarily going to be, hard on your health, something that we can run for the next 12 weeks. And then from there, if we wanted to build it up further, further into June, then maybe into July, that's where we could start looking at adding in a low dose of an oral. Let's say the beginning of July, we add in a low dose of Anavar. And now we're going to run that Anavar through July and through August. The cleanse started at 20, a couple weeks later goes to 40, a couple weeks later goes to 60, a couple weeks later goes to 80, a couple weeks later goes to 100, a couple weeks later goes to 120, and then we take a break for a short time. So at that point, you're going, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. So you could really run it June through August that way, pretty much, without really coming off, just slowly titrating up. And if we were to do that, let's say you came to me, you had labs done in February, you haven't used anything. Now we're working together at the end of March. We're starting just the test only April, May, June, we go into a cycle. It wouldn't hurt to get another labs done at the end of June, see where everything is at before we thought about turning it up another step. And then July, August is where we would add in, say, that 25 Anavar then. So now we have 300 test, 300 MAST, or possibly EQ and Proviron. And then we add in, 25 Anavar. And I would call that cycle doses, low cycle doses. But hey, if you're in good shape and you're dieting your butt off, you're going to be in pretty good shape by the time June, July hits. You know what I'm saying? So I think you could really do a lot with that. But of course, everybody is, so sick of Dave Palumbo. What a idiot. Where's your YouTube channel? Oh my God. Total Science does not like Dave. Okay. I get it. Dave is polarizing, isn't he? There's a lot of people that don't like Dave. I like Dave. And part of it is I've learned a lot from him over the years. I get it. I think that there's like the Dave Palumbo and I get it. If I only knew Dave from what he puts out today, maybe I would feel different, but I've been on the journey with him. There was a time when he was like the only guy on the internet, I should say podcast, that was talking about gear. And that inspired me. I was like, yeah, this is cool. I'm learning a lot. I want to help people this way too at some point. Like, this is my vision. So Dave inspired me in a lot of ways. This is like 2006. I think he had the No Bull radio show with John Romano on MD, and then 2009 that turned into RX. But I get it, man. I get it. Total Science, yeah, he did a video saying that, and that's the thing. It's as people in like the media space, you get more clicks if you're dramatic, right? So when you say like Proviron doesn't do anything, then, it gets attention, right? People are going to watch that. So yeah. And, you're welcome for the answer, brother. That's exactly how I would try to figure things out though. You want to try to break it down and put a plan together. And of course that plan doesn't have to stay that way. That's a tentative plan. You know what I mean? But at least now you have an outline for how things are going to go. Cornelius Parkin is in the house. What's up, brother? Good to have you here, man. Cornelius, we talked about all sorts of stuff already. We talked bad about you for the first 30 minutes. And let's see. Yeah. So Joe, who had the skin removal, he said, best investment I ever made. Never took my shirt off in public, not once. I love going shirtless today, and my scars have faded substantially. Dude, it sounds like you put in an incredible amount of work, man, to get to the place where you could have that skin removal done. What does Getty say here? I went to Turkey for 10 days post-op. Oh, what did you have done? Hospital and hotel. Very nice results coming out. Let's see. I'm not sure. I didn't see his earlier message. Let's see. Ty says slew before cognitive and overall, better for cognitive and overall energy. Cardarine, I noticed easier cardio. No experience with Dada. So, yeah, I'm with you there, man. I definitely feel like I got more benefit out of it. Marcus, I've been researching PEDs and bodybuilding in general for 20 years, and you've definitely put out some of the best, if not the best, most relevant and useful information. Dude, Marcus, thank you very much, man. I greatly appreciate that. And like I said at the beginning of this, I never want to tell you guys what to do, literally, but I do want to share with you my experience, and that includes my experience working with people over the last really 15 years, but the last decade full time. And it includes everybody else I podcast with here. We all have our own takes. We don't always agree, and that's okay too. We don't have to agree to get along, right? In fact, it is good to be able to give you guys different perspectives. You can apply that to your own lives and then see how that works. I'm scrolling back through here and I'm looking for any questions now. Matthew says, just got back to training the last few months from being away for 7 to 8 years. Welcome back, brother. Dad bod going on, but would like to recomp if possible. Hope can help. Thanks. Love the show. So, number one, Matthew, are you on? And I'm going to the basics. All right. I know you're probably wondering what gear should I run, aren't you? We're going to back up because the gear stuff really is pretty simple and it doesn't have to be complicated. And anybody who tells you that it is, they are attempting to be self-important. I promise you that, or they're trying to sell you something. What I'm going to sell you is this, that the number one thing is going to be locking it in. If you haven't been consistent for the past 7, 8 years, it's going to take a while to rebuild these habits. Okay. So be patient with yourself, forgive yourself when you do make mistakes, but learn from those mistakes and freaking pick back up and figure out, okay, so I had a work trip for the weekend and I didn't realize I needed to bring my food with me. I only had 3 meals and then I didn't know what else I was going to do. I screwed up for the rest of the weekend. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Next time, how are you going to fix that? Or I ended up having to stay late 2 days this week. So I missed 2 meals. How can you fix that next time? These things are going to come up, right? And I think there's 2 ways of doing it. We can either compartmentalize it and say, oh, I messed up. I'm so stupid. Nobody else would have made this kind of mistake. And then you put it in a box and you put it off to the side and you never think about it again. And guess what? You never learned anything from it. The other option is to say, okay, yeah, I messed up. It's on me. But what do I do next time to, maybe not make the same mistake again? And if you can do that, that's called progress. And that's how you will get better. And you have to go through that phase of making mistakes. I mean, that phase of making mistakes is called life, right? And as long as we can try to figure out how to correct it for next time, then we're definitely going to be in a better place overall. So yeah, man, just keep doing that, keep doing that. And remember too, that this is a long-term project. So you don't need to do it all at once. You just need to do a little bit better than you did yesterday. And if you can do that, you're going to continue every day, do a little bit better than you did yesterday. And you're going to continue to make progress. And don't get caught in the trap, one more thing, of doing it all at once. You don't need to go to a super hard diet with a ton of cardio and I'm going to train 6 days a week. Like, let's make something more reasonable. What can you commit to long term? Because, ideally, yeah, we want to see you get in awesome shape and have the physique that you want. But ultimately, it's the guys that can stick with this, that do it the longest, that ultimately do make the best progress. And we want something that's sustainable. I want to be podcasting here in 15 years in my 60s, right? And I want you guys to be with me still training. You know what I mean? So I don't want this to be a short-term thing for you. I want you to ask yourself, like, how can I commit to this in small ways and make it part of my life? Because it's not just about getting the physique you want. It's about being healthier. It's about being able to carry your body through the world. You know what I mean? If you're getting older too, then we're all getting older. You want as much muscle as you can as you age. It's going to help to keep your metabolism up. It's going to keep you from getting hurt. Dude, look at Fuad. Like if Fuad didn't have the amount of muscle he did in that motorcycle wreck, he wouldn't be with us, I promise you. And we've heard so many stories like that where muscle has saved someone's life. The same thing applies to an old guy who falls on his hip when he's 90. If you're all muscled up now and you can hold that muscle, you're going to do better when you take that fall at 75. You know what I'm saying? So, it's all short-term goals, but then those long-term benefits as well. For a non-competitor, does it make sense to run higher dosages one more thing, because Matthew, I believe you probably were asking about gear stuff. Get your test levels checked before you run anything. Make sure that you know what your natural test levels are. And if they are low, part of it could be from poor nutrition and poor sleep habits. And if you can straighten all those things out and you get the diet running good, you have good, healthy nutrition, essential fats in your diet, then check it again in 8 weeks, and then see where you're at. And if you're still low, then so be it. We talked at the beginning about the levels of enhancement. You could literally just get into like a therapeutic level of testosterone, but I would give yourself a chance first, and either way. We got another dad bod guy, but let me get back to this one. He says, for a non-competitor, does it make sense to run higher dosages in a diet phase like competitors, 24 week gain phase, and titrate to 1.5 grams? Would you go higher in a diet? Okay, give me a minute. I'm going to take a quick drink here. Ooh, and I want to talk to you guys about healing bad shots too, because I had some stuff that I don't think ever talked about on the channel before, and I just had to help a couple guys with this recently in the last month, and it made me think we should have this conversation. So we'll do that next. All right, get another pouch here. The world is right. We are good to go. All right, so. Everybody's unique, like we talked about, BG. But for the non-competitor, does it make sense to run higher doses? So, everybody has different approaches. You've heard Dusty probably on the channel, where he worked a lot with Dante Trudell, the creator of DC Training, who also, by the way, DC Training and Dante's supplement company, True Nutrition, is our main advertiser, which I didn't mention at the beginning. Use our code THINK for good supplements over there. Dante's approach was keep the gear lower in the off season and then ramp it up in contest time. Now, when Dusty's talked about that, it makes sense that he was able to continually do progressive overload and get stronger with lower gear in the off season. And then because the food was high, and then as the food went down, the gear went up. Honestly, I don't really have many guys that are running a ton of gear that are non-competitors. Over the years, we have pared back a good amount, and we're getting like pretty much the same results. If we didn't, then I would raise the doses, but we have been getting the same results with less gear. So would I use more in a diet phase? It's hard to say, but in my experience, I would say it's probably, the people I work with, it's probably been pretty similar, honestly. But how I develop the cycles is different than it used to be. You notice that we just went over a cycle plan for a guy who wanted to get in shape for summer. We started out with, for him, 300 tests. And then, 6-8 weeks in, we increased that by adding another compound. Now we're on 600 total milligram. And then, a little further in, now we have like the last 8 weeks left. It was a long cycle, a 20-week cycle. The last 8 weeks, we added in a low dose of Anavar. So I like to build the cycles as we go. Let's say that you were in an off season, okay? Let's say that you were in an off season, BG. You've taken some downtime. You did a health phase. You've done everything you can to maintain the muscle that you had built. You're training hard still, right? Maybe you've shifted some of your carbohydrates to fats. Maybe you're trying to work a little bit more in insulin sensitivity, but the calories are still overall pretty high. We get into that diet phase, you're probably not going to need a ton of gear out the gate to be able to evoke a good response, right? And part of that response, I think, is the psychological response of being back on cycle, right? But let's say personally, I might start you on just test, or if we do have a DHT available, maybe test in a DHT and I couple that together. I mean, if we're talking let's say that you do run cycles that are like 1.5 grams. Yeah, we might start with, let's say that that's your average dosing, 1.5 grams per cycle. Then yeah, I would probably, as you mentioned, titrate up, but I don't think I would go any higher, really. I think we can get a lot out of, because also too, look at the compounds that we're using, like let's say that you like using Tren. Tren is going to be a lot stronger milligram per milligram. So I don't know if going by the milligrams per total cycle, I don't know if that makes sense, because if you're using 200 Tren per week, I mean, I would say, like, how effective is that compared to, say, 400 EQ? I feel like the 200 Tren, 400 EQ, they're kind of two different things. 400 Tren is a whole lot more Tren. You know what I mean? I don't know. So I wouldn't compare it. I don't really, I guess, go by total milligrams or total grams. But yeah, I would definitely titrate up, and it would probably end up being, pretty similar off season and diet. Now that's just me. Like I said, Dante might do that differently, because it does make sense. If you could run less gear in your off season, then that leaves you room, because Dusty said he just kept getting stronger through his diets, which if you're on low gear through the off season and now you're ramping it up through the diet, heck yeah, man, you're going to keep getting stronger and stronger. Yes, Dave was a pretty 415. Joe asks, what dosage of GH do you recommend to increase fat loss? I don't see growth hormone as being a really great fat burner, honestly. I'm not saying that I don't like growth. I'm not saying it's not a benefit, but if you're getting into it solely for fat loss, I think that there are a lot of other things that you can get better benefit from first. You might get some benefit from it, say in an off season, not getting as fat as you may have. Now, we already talked, Joe, so I know you already had that skin removal. You're probably going to be one of those guys that doesn't want to, like, actually quote unquote bulk in the off season. You take a guy like Dusty or Ron. Now, in their prime, you could probably take them from take Ron from 250, blast him up to 330, and then pull him back down to 285 ripped, right? Average human beings, their bodies don't respond like that. Average human beings, especially a guy who already has like a predisposition to get fat, you start putting that fat on and you're going to have to work 3 times harder to get the fat off than it took to get the couple pounds of muscle you gained, So I would say a slow, steady increase in the off season. And for you, then that might be honestly, it might be, you might find that even 2-3 units of growth could be beneficial to not get quite as fat, as you're trying to grow. But I would suggest, yeah, you don't probably ever want to get into a position where you're quote unquote like in a heavy bulk, Matt Morrison, absolutely love you. These live chats and what you do with Angry Dave. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see what else we have here. And I know let me just go to the super chats really quick to see what else, in case there's anything else going on here. Okay. Steve's got one for us from super chat. And then I had something I wanted to share with you guys. I got to make sure I hit this. He says, 42, 5'6", 212, on, I don't know what Zepbound, and down 70 and looking to do a cycle. What's Zepbound? I don't even know what that is, guys. You tell me, what's Zepbound? I'm going to look it up. Gives me a chance to not talk for a minute too. Oh, Trizepatide. Okay. I didn't know it by the name brand. Well, fantastic, dude. I had a feeling it was one of the GLPs. I honestly, Trizepatide ties with us. He's the only maybe I shouldn't say out people that I work with that are taking stuff, but he has a prescription for it. I haven't used a ton of it though. I'll just say that. But anyway, though, that wasn't his question. He's down 70 pounds. So Steve, my question to you would be like, are you experienced at all with gear? You know, if you're looking, because I would say this without being able to give you dosing, unless you're commenting back to me right now. Let's see here. Thank you, Ali. I appreciate it, brother. All right. So here's my thought overall. I would suggest that you do keep things modest. The number one thing that I can say is, I'm going to bring your question back up, Steve. If you came down 70 pounds, you know, you probably had a decent amount of body fat on you, right? You're probably going to be more prone to putting more body fat on. So I would suggest to you that you probably keep the diet tight, and that's going to be the key. And anything you do gear-wise is going to be beneficial to helping you to gain more muscle along the way. You know, obviously your protein is going to be high in each meal, and that's going to be the foundation. But you know, even man, it's generic, but just test in EQ, test in mass, test in primo. Any of these things would be good. If you aren't very experienced with gear, let's say that you're not running much. Let's say you're just on TRT right now, and that's all you do. You've been getting, let's say you're getting TRT from your doctor, and that's it, and that's all you've ever done. Then, dude, if you take 300 tests in itself, man, that's going to be a world of difference. Honestly, that in itself would be great. 450 tests, yeah, it's going to be even better. But the higher that test goes, the more you will have to worry about side effects. Like we talked about at the very beginning, like the stages of enhancement. Now you're getting into like actual legit enhanced ranges. The higher you get in those ranges, the more likely you're going to need to consider controlling it, right? But I would have no problem with, let's even throw not a wild number, but we'll say 400 tests, 300 EQ. You know, something like that if you're looking to grow. EQ is still available. We don't worry about the master primo since some places it's harder to get right now. But 400 tests, 300 EQ would be a splashing cycle. You do fantastic with it, you know, but, you know, EQ can affect some people's estrogen. So I would give it a month, and then I would check to see where your estrogen levels are. Have an AI on hand in case you need to wrap that up a little bit, tighten it up. Or if your estrogen's really low, you could always pull the EQ back a little bit. Maybe you're at 400 tests, 300 EQ. Maybe you leave it at 300 EQ and in 400 tests, you bring up to, 500, something like that. Then a little bit more tests, maybe that'll bring that estrogen level up a little bit, So either way, you'd be good. You have AI in hand. If the estrogen is too high, you can increase the test a little bit. If the estrogen is too low, that would be my suggestion to you. And if you're going to continue to work on fat loss, you could, I explained the low dose clen. Something like that I think could be beneficial, and the side effects are going to be pretty low if you're just taking 20 micrograms at a time with clen, and fantastic work, man. That's huge, dude. 70 pounds is freaking massive. I'm going to scroll back down to the bottom here, see what else we had. All right. I'm cutting well on my first cycle of 250 test, 250 primo, 25 Anavar, 4 IUGH. Once I get to 8%, should I start to lean bulk with the same compounds and ratios? I want to add some mass safely. I guess it depends on how long it takes to get to that body fat desert rider. I'll tell you what, man, I feel like every diet that I've done ends with us building it up at the end. Like we get to a point, and here's the thing. If you diet hard enough, you're going to reach a point where you're going to need some type of a load meal, or a load day, or like a high carb day. So you get to a point where you're like depleting down. Maybe you hit a wall. You're not making much progress. You just seem to be holding more water. And then you end up having a cheat meal, and then all of a sudden that launches you forward. A couple days later, you're starving, and the scale's moving again, and you're hot every time you eat. that's a great place to be. And it also tells us you're in a position where we can probably, strategically add food in at the right times. And when your body's ready, it will demand more food, I used to make the mistake years and years ago of thinking like a bulk. You just like add more, and then you add more on top of that and add more on top of that. Whereas like, let's get you into good shape like you're doing right now. And eventually you get to a point where the body wants more food. And before you know it, we've got the carbs built up really high and you're still losing fat. And people get freaked by that. And they're like, oh, but I need to be gaining now. I want to switch this. I want to gain, but the scale's still going down. But I'm like, yeah, but you're eating 200 grams carbs more. I promise you, you are gaining more muscle eating 200 grams carbs more. Don't keep pushing it. You know what I'm saying? Ride that out. If it allows you to keep getting leaner while keeping those carbs really high, you're probably going to be in a net positive for muscle as you go. We saw that study a while back that was showing that in a 500 calorie deficit, and I'm sure it was natural people studied, that you can gain muscle. And I've seen it. Guys coming out the other side of contest preps that are bigger than when they started, until you get to a certain point. Like when you're a big pro level, then you're probably not going to continue to gain muscle through a diet phase. But for the vast majority of people, I really do think that you can continue to grow while in a deficit. So if you get to that space, man, that would be my thought. I would continue dieting, Desert Rider, until your body demands more food, and try to get that food built up while you're still coming down on the scale. Like that's the golden place to be. Obviously, you're only going to be able to ride that for so long. But hey, if you can do that for 8 weeks of turning the food up and getting leaner, then more power to you, man. Eventually, it would take bringing the food back down to really get, peeled, and at least having some real low depletion days between those high days. But yeah, it sounds like you're not trying to get there. It becomes counterproductive at a certain point. Like you're saying 8% is good by you. Dude, if you get to 8%, you're pretty freaking lean, Total newbie. Okay, so this is back to Steve. Total newbie, never ran a cycle, and he was the guy who lost 70 pounds. Then I'm going to tell you what, man. Number one, get your testosterone levels checked, right? Make sure that you know what your baseline is, because when you come off the cycle, you want to make sure that you can get back to where you were, right? So do that first. And you can get affordable online labs nowadays all over the place. I did see, you guys tell me, did you see a big price hike in lab work? There has been a big price hike. I saw that Merrick went up a good amount. Like their non-sensitive E2 test used to be $10. Now it's like 30 something dollars. Their test and free test was a lot cheaper. That went up significantly. But definitely get your lab work done first. Know where your baseline of test is, so that when you do run a cycle, after you do a post-cycle therapy, you'll want to know, like, okay, am I back to baseline? In your situation, man, literally 300, 400 tests would be plenty. Like, you will grow like a freaking weed, absolutely, off of something like that. All right. What else do we have here? Oh, man. Coach Tom asks about gear that benefits for arm wrestling. I can't believe you guys. You guys run as much gear as us bodybuilders, Tom. I've seen the cycles that some of these arm wrestlers are running. And what's cool is a lot of these guys are building their whole physiques. Not all of them, but I know an arm wrestler locally who has a legit total gym in his basement. Like, you have to turn sideways to get between the machines and stuff. He has like probably 20, 30, probably good 25, 30 machines in his basement, including a stair mill. And guys got it set up, but everything's so packed in there. There's tiny little aisles and it's all jammed in. Man, the same cycles for you would be good for us. And you may even want to look into things that are related to power. I mean, what would a power lifter take? That would kind of be my thought. Ultimately, you want to be able to build the muscle up. The more tissue you have, the better. So there's going to be that anabolic element of like growing, right? But if it came down to like, what are we going to use to be as strong as possible? Man, another thing to think about, because this is out of my wheelhouse, by the way. So I'm just kind of spitballing some stuff at you. I feel like there is like a lot of tension in those forearm tendons, right? I don't know how much I would want to dry that out with Winstrol or something like that. Maybe keep some Deca in there at all times. I don't know. But I would even consider looking at orals for strength toward the end. Test it out, see where you're at. But something like Anadrol or Halo as an intermittent thing. I'm not saying every day, but say like the day of the match. I wonder how something like that, and the day before, something like, 20 milligrams of Halo the day of, how would that affect you? You would have to figure that out by having experimented previously, but you can use those things, intra-workout to kind of gauge what they do for you. But, that's a strong, freaking powerful compound is something like Halo or Anadrol. And the rest of it I really do think would be kind of similar to what we would do. The only thing I would encourage you to stay away from is anything that would dry you out. I feel like we don't want dry joints, dry connective tissue in a situation like yours. I did meet a couple arm wrestlers though. They're definitely, you guys are intense people, man. You guys take that stuff to the extreme. You're a lot like bodybuilders in your own way. What's the max calories per week coming out of a cut on a reverse diet that I can I add 100 calories per day and up by another 100 each week without seeing fat gain? Currently at 10%, 200 test, 80 mass, 2 I use GH. Everybody's going to be unique, right? I would definitely take it slow. I would personally add in, let's say that you're reversing out now. I might add in, for starters, I might add in a cheat meal first. If you've been on a real strict diet and you're at a point where you're like, oh God, I'm going to die if I don't have a cheat meal. Let's add a cheat meal in and leave the food where it is. So you get a cheat meal and then you go back on plan, and then we reevaluate like on the 4th day after the cheat meal, and we see where you're at, that might be my first thought. Then depending, let's see, how big did you say you are? You didn't say, so it depends on your size too, but let's just say you're looking at your picture. Let's say you're 200 pounds, just for the sake of conversation, maybe 45 grams of carbs, a cup of rice, something like that. And then watch how you respond. I would leave it, watch what that does, and then don't add more food just based off of, like what can I do at my max? I would just leave that, because you may continue to increase, or you eat that and watch you suck it up and get tighter and drop lower. The answer is going to be different, depending on how your body responds. All right, what else do we have here? James said he sent a question on IG, but happy to share the pic. I don't have the questions pulled up from IG. We're just going with them off here, James. You're welcome to toss one in. We got a little bit of time left here. Oh, let me get back to one thing I did want to tell you about. I have 2 more things I want to share too. Number one is I'm working with a guy who he had never used EQ before. And we don't know if it's the EQ he bought or if it's just EQ in general, but he's had a couple bad shots. We started a new cycle. He did a glute shot and it began to swell and was painful. He did a delt shot a couple days later and it began to swell and was painful. We had to stop the cycle there, reevaluate what we're doing and get this pain under control. Now, let's talk about trying to recover a site that you've had a bad shot in. All right. So I'm not going to get into infections. That's a whole other thing, but do keep in mind, even if you do have a sterile shot that is irritating enough, that in itself can cause a sterile infection. Your body is sensing that there's like a foreign attacker in here. It'll want to wall that crap off. Because it reads the test or the hormone or the solvent. It reads all of that as a foreign invader. It's going to want to wall that off. And if it does, that's how an abscess forms. So we want to definitely avoid that. Now, if you get a bad shot and it's starting to swell,
I'm not a fan of like, hey, let's run a bunch of NSAIDs all the time, but I would definitely bring an NSAID in ASAP, try to get that inflammation process cut off. Like, let's hack the inflammatory process, because if we can cut that off in the first 24 hours, we are definitely going to speed up how fast an injury can recover. And that goes for injuries in the gym too. Let's say you're in the gym and you tweak your back and oh crap, this is it. I would suggest getting home, eating your next meal, and taking, 600, 800 ibuprofen with that, assuming obviously you're a healthy individual, can take an ibuprofen and try to, let's hack that inflammatory process. If you can hack that in the first 24 hours, you are going to dramatically speed up your recovery. Now, here's a thing that I haven't heard people talk about much, and that is compression. All right. Now, I found this. I've had a bad quad shot that starts swelling on me, and I know that the gear is good, the gear is clean, but it just didn't sit right. It's irritating. I've used an ACE bandage to lightly wrap that quad. Now, I'm not talking about like heavy, constriction. We're not trying to occlude the leg, but just light compression I found, and put that on, and maybe you have a few hours. Ooh, I didn't take my morning supplements today. Oh crap, and I just pulled my headphones out. Things are falling apart here, aren't they? Sorry guys. I just felt my leg and I realized my pocket is full of vitamins. I got to get on that. I take a lot of vitamins, guys. These are, I don't know if you can see that. These are all my morning stack. If you ever wanted me to, I could go through what all of those are, but they're all for, specific things. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, like I was saying though, that if you lightly compress that area, it does help to push that inflammation out. You may wake up in the morning feeling way, way better. So I figured I'd throw that to you. I don't suggest like heavily massaging a super inflamed spot, but you get through a couple of, but you could do, let's say it's a quad shot again. You could get some light blood flow into it, ride the bike. Just getting that blood flow in is going to help to, move around your blood, get fresh blood in there. Basically, when an area gets inflamed, it's like a traffic jam, so all the blood is trying to rush in to carry away waste materials, to be able to bring, bits of new growth peptides and recovery peptides like MGF1 to help to get this area to repair. That said, sorry, I got a few texts that are coming in all of a sudden. That said, if the blood all gets trapped in there, that process can't happen. It's kind of like gridlock, it's like a traffic jam. So we get that blood flow going. It'll help to speed that process up. A little bit of light compression help to speed that process up. Heating pad will help to speed that process up. And then after a few days, now this is after you're already on the road to recovery. That's where we could start doing massage, just light massage. Like my, I've got one of these Theragun. I'll tell you what, this thing comes in handy for all sorts of injuries. I'm not saying you need to buy this brand, but I do believe that Theragun is a good overall brand to use. I know they are more expensive. But anyway, that was one thing I wanted to make sure that I got in here, was just talking about trying to recover from a bad shot. And then honestly, I would work that site out of rotation for at least several weeks. I think it's a mistake that once you've had a site that was inflamed, even if it's like 80% better, I just still would leave better alone, because if you go ahead and put another shot in there, even if it sits okay, that site is already irritated, and I'm afraid that you're going to make it a lot worse. So I'm going to throw that at you. All right. Barbells and Music says, hey buddy, love this. How do I make semaglutide, tirzepatide, retatrutide start working again after high stim cycles with Tren, T3, Clen, yohimbine, etc.? They no longer have an effect and I'm rebounding. Dang. It is interesting. I will tell you guys that I've noticed that the more GLP-1s people use, the more they do get used to it. You know, I can even see it in myself. 2 milligrams of Retatrutide is not doing for me what it used to do, you know, as far as appetite control goes. I mean, gosh, I think that at the end of the day, the only thing that I've seen work is, you know, for compounds in general, has been taking breaks. It's a rough spot to be, especially if you kind of dug yourself into a position where you need it. Yeah, I'm sorry I don't have a better answer. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. You know, unfortunately, I don't think the answer is taking more. All right. On semaglutide at the moment, trying to eat clean, just lost 10 kilograms so far. Should I keep cutting? He says, I'm skinny fat at the moment. Should I keep cutting? Yeah, Matthew. So I'll tell you what, man. I'll tell you what, man. At the end of the day, there's a lot of guys in your position, you know, that maybe they're holding fat, but ultimately they want to grow. I do think that getting into better shape is going to be the goal first. And in that process, you are able to gain muscle. I think that it's a mistake to think that you need to either be cutting or bulking. You know, I think that you can do both at once. In fact, I've shown you guys this picture before. Let me see if I can find it here again real quick. This is my example of, yep, I got it here. Here is a client and friend of mine, Vache. So picture on the left is the very beginning of a contest prep. Picture on the right is about 5 or so weeks after the show. After the show, he didn't go to a rebound diet. He didn't do anything special. He just quit dieting. He just went back to eating whatever he wanted. No question. It was a long prep too, 22 weeks. Every time I worked with him, we had to go to keto. There were probably even points of protein only. He may even have gone down to, or he may have even gone up to like 2 hours of cardio for all I know. He had to do a lot. He had to work hard to get into shape. And he wasn't a big guy, you know, but he got peeled every time. And he was natural. So it's not like it was PED induced. But just through consistently following the diet through the whole process and through training hard, he ended up gaining more muscle. And this is, like I said, natural on a keto diet. If he can do that, you know, and I think a lot of people can do more than they realize when it comes to gaining muscle in a diet. So I would just say continue to focus, Steve, on trying to get in the best shape that you can in the process. Barry 1696 says, if you're pre-diabetic or type 2, should you just stay away from HGH, or is insulin a must? You know, I've talked to people who are high-level competitors that are diabetic, including IFBB Pro, who just doesn't use growth hormone. You know, at the end of the day, it's not a make or break type thing. So I honestly, and the diabetics that I have worked with, none of them have used growth or were interested in using growth. You know, if we get into a position where we need to doctor your blood sugar with insulin because of your growth hormone dosing, I feel like that's a problem in itself. And that's not saying that we can't use exogenous insulin as a PED, but if we are dependent on it just to stay healthy and we don't need to take it, I find that if the lower we can get the insulin, the better off we can do. I found that diabetics, type 1 diabetics that I've worked with, the lower we can get their insulin needs, the better they can do. And I can't remember what the dosing was, how many units we had gotten him to, but I had done some experimentation and we had a number for one particular guy where we found that it was, and I don't want to throw a number out there, but we had a number that we had realized that after we got him to X amount of units per day, that it was under 20. I can't remember if it was under 10 though. So I think it was under 20, but we got him into a position though where like every time we could get him in a position where his body required less than that amount, that's where he made his ultimate best progress. And I've seen that before. Yeah, Casey says that's the hardest part with any screwing up, is not shaming yourself for it when you screw up and thinking that you need to be perfect. Just don't quit. You're absolutely right, man. This is a game where it's you versus you. And you know what? If you make a mistake, own it, because the faster you can own that, the faster you can learn from it and not make the same mistakes again. I'm trying to see. Let's see. What else do I have? You guys have been so freaking awesome. Who's still with me, by the way? And also, by the way, we have 166 people hanging out right now. Hey, listen, if you haven't hit the like button and you are enjoying this, would you please do me the favor of hitting the like button now? Because it is going to help after we're done here. It's going to help to keep this thing moving out. I want to try to get, you know, as many views as we can on this video. So thank you very much. I appreciate you guys being here. Everybody who has commented, everybody who has hit the like button already, you're freaking awesome. Thank you. And if you haven't yet, I see those like buttons coming in right now. Thank you guys. It's greatly appreciated. It makes a big difference. It doesn't like push our content into your algorithm, but it does help me to get other people to see it. Really, it's crazy, because at the end of the day, you know, I love it. You guys have messaged me. A lot of you guys have messaged me and been like, hey, you know, thank you for doing this show. It's helped me get through my prep or through my day at work or whatever. And, you know, you always hear like famous, like I'm talking real famous people that are like, oh, well, if it wasn't for our fans, you know, but I get that, because literally, if it wasn't for you right now, who would I be talking to? I would be crazy talking to myself in my office right now. So it really is because of you guys, and I appreciate you and our growth. Any growth you see with our channel, it's because of you too. If you guys weren't here watching and liking and commenting, like seriously, if it wasn't for you, then the channel would just freaking not grow, period. So I try to put out the content that you guys enjoy. And, you know, I try to stick with that. And, you know, of course, I want to have fun with this. So there are probably some things that you guys just tolerate because, you know, I want to talk about it. I appreciate you going through, listening through that stuff too. Does generics versus pharma really matter? And I assume we're talking about, we'll assume you're talking about growth here. Okay, I've used some pharma growth. All right. I wouldn't say that it was that different than a good generic. For me, you know, I've worked with guys who have had more side effects on generics and better tolerated and had better experiences, more side effects with pharma and had less side effects and a better experience with a good generic, like better results with a good generic. So, you know, I know that Bill Llewellyn did some research back 20 years ago on hygitropins, and he found that Hyges at the time, and that doesn't mean it's the same because the game's changed so many times since then, right? But he found that Hyge was actually at that time more pure than one of the pharma growths that he tested. But it was at a fraction of the price, kind of. You know, I'll tell you what. Is growth hormone made differently? Here's what you're going to get from pharma for sure, is assuming that it's real pharma, because there's also that. There's a lot more fakes. Growth hormone is a huge market to fake, a lot of money to be made. You're going to get a consistent product for sure. You know, that said, if you know where to get good generics and you have a source that you trust, at least for now, whatever batch you have that's good, you can trust that good batch, right? So but is the next batch going to be as good? You know, there's no promises ever, even for a good source that you trust. And that's part of the game that we're in. If you know, you can't afford it, what would be better? You know, the price of, say, running 2 units of Norditrope versus, you know, let's say 5 units of a high quality generic. I don't know. You know, first of all, how does your body respond to the Nordies? versus how do you respond to the generics, you know? If you can tolerate 5 units of generics, maybe that would be the better buy because you're able to run a lot more of it. You know, I think that we do get some confirmation biased with the pharma, because when you're investing that much money, you're like, oh yeah, I really see the difference. But I think at the end of the day, you know, as great as growth is, and there are some awesome benefits to it, I still do think that it's always been, it's a little overhyped. You know, I think there are good benefits, but yeah. What else do we have going on here, guys? Peter Burns says, howdy, Scott. Cheers for the t-shirts, by the way. Oh, this is Peter Burns, who won the contest on the Drugs and Stuff podcast with Dave. Question is, will 10 milligrams Anavar make a noticeable difference on top of my 200 milligrams of test? With 2 IU, 80 milligrams mass, 2 IU GH. Still have a few drinking nights with gigs, etc. Hashtag liver. I mean, it depends on what your goals are. You know, if we go back to the beginning, if you are looking for TRT plus results, then absolutely, you know, you're going to get some increased performance. We did that podcast with Scott about, I think it was titled all anabolics equally grow muscle, something like that. And looking at the studies, it showed that it was between 40 to 60 milligrams of Anavar was an optimal dose for gaining muscle. So, you know, is 10 milligrams enough? You're going to get something out of it. But honestly, if your goal is to be enhanced, let's look at it that way. Let's talk about the difference between TRT plus, getting a little bit of a boost, versus looking to be enhanced. No, you know, you're not. But I would also look at the alcohol, because alcohol, it takes us out of fat loss, number one. A lot of times too, people don't count the actual grams of alcohol. Each gram of alcohol is 7 calories versus each gram of carb is 4. Each gram of fat is 9. So we're kind of right in the middle there. So, you know, don't forget you're getting a lot of extra calories through that too. It definitely offsets a deficit. There's no question if you have a few drinks. I've unfortunately worked with people who can't stop drinking, that maybe they do good through the week and then on the weekends they hit it hard. And what ends up happening is, you know, a lot of times we look at fat loss like this. We're like, oh, I followed my diet today, so that means I lost a lot of fat. The way I see it, it doesn't work that way. I followed my diet today, so now I'm starting to get depleted and getting into a better position to lose fat. And then you follow it tomorrow and get a little more depleted, a little more depleted, a little more depleted. Blood sugar's consistently been lower and lower and lower, you know, and we're riding low BG levels now for a consistent period of time. Now we're in a good window to start losing fat, right? Versus if you were to then have a cheat meal, it's going to start that process over. And if you drink some alcohol, maybe it's, if you drink one glass of wine or one drink on the weekend, it's not going to be anything. If you have a few drinks, it definitely will offset that to a degree, you know. Alcohol literally will shut the fat loss process off. Do you want to combine oral gear with drinks and alcohol? I would encourage you to go another direction, you know, than increasing the oral, because you are definitely putting more stress on your body, right? And long term, just the Anavar on its own, that's enough stress, right? And at least while you're on it, maybe take a break from the drinking. Let's see here. What else do we have? Oh my God, you guys are freaking awesome here, by the way, with all these comments. And I got a few thumbs downs today, but that's okay because they help too. Can't believe it. If somebody doesn't like the show, why would they give me a thumbs down? Why don't they just leave? But whatever, it is what it is. You have to grow thick skin. I had somebody say the other day on that interview I did with Rick Collins, they were like, it's funny how these influencers are buying pro mics and pretending to be journalists. I was like, bro, I didn't say anything to him, but I was like, bro, I've been pretending to be a journalist for over a decade now. That's what I thought to myself. All right. Let me double check the super chats here, see if there's anything else that I haven't gotten to. And I'm going to be recording with Ron and Dusty here a little bit today for our Wednesday show. I think we're going to be doing a couple shows, actually. Let's see what else is going on here. And I see a couple of you guys commenting, so I want to get back to that. We talked about, you know what? We'll talk a little bit more about Retatrutide next time. Tren in a growth phase. I was going to get into that, but we went into all sorts of other stuff. I mean, I've talked to you guys about it before. I don't see a problem with Tren in a growth phase. I mean, it's a freaking strong steroid, right? I think you can get some great growth from it, but you definitely want to keep it in context. It's not something that I would use for a new guy. But you know what? I've had some people that like, that's the compound they respond best to. And we've used Tren in the off season. And hey, everybody is unique. Everybody's different. It's not the first thing I think of though. That's for sure. Let's see here. Scroll back down to the bottom, see what you guys are saying behind my back right now. Thanks, Jake. I appreciate you, man. Let's see. Barbells and Music said, wait, we'll get back to him. Cornelius says, alcohol is literally a poison. If you are taking building your body seriously, you do not drink. Yeah, it's bodybuilding 101. That's for sure. But the way I look at it, man, is that everybody is in their own place, and it's not my place to judge. You know what I mean? So I agree with you 100% though, Cornelius. Like, there's no question in my mind, man. And also, I want to see people make the best progress they can, and they're not going to do that on alcohol. And I think that's my main point. So it comes down to, like, you know, what's more important to you? You know, the drinking, even if it's just a few rare drinks, or is it going to be the progress? For me, it's going to be the progress. I won't forget my vitamins. Thanks. I have them on my desk here. Take one right now. I have like 30 left. I'll take the rest when we're done. Okay. Back to barbells and music, though. Let's get what he says. And he says, did a big cycle test, Tren, mask, T3, 7500 Clen, Himbine. Yeah, you know, so this, I tried to approach it, man. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for you. Problem is Retatrutide now doesn't work at all. Help. I mean, my first thought would be coming off of it, giving yourself, I would give it, you know, like 8 weeks clean, honestly, and down on TRT. You know, it may have been, I don't know what your history was, what your situation was, how much you used then, how much you're using now. Maybe you just needed more. I don't know. You know, I found that for me, starting at a very small dose, like 1 milligram per week, it was split into a couple doses, did very little. Got to 2 milligrams and I felt a strong effect. And now I don't feel a strong effect at 2 milligrams. So I'm right there with you. It doesn't have the same effect that it did on me before. I am going to go up, you know, and I decided that this week I'm going to go up a little bit to 3 milligrams and just push it a little bit further. But eventually I'm going to come off of it altogether and take a break. And I'm going to do that well before I build that dose up too high, you know? So I think that it's important to like be mentally prepared. You know, maybe you need to get yourself out of a deficit first, because it can be a lot if you're not used to dealing with hunger, if you haven't been used to dealing with hunger and now all of a sudden you're starving. So it might be a matter of trying to build the diet back up. GLP-1s will hit a wall at some point. DGP, Holy Hand Grenade, nice name, says, good 1 to 2 months off is what you need to restart. Yeah, I would agree. That's what I would suggest too. I don't think there's an instant fix, you know. While you're taking downtime and you have the food turned up a little bit higher, you can look at trying to keep your blood sugar under control, manage that, you know, through your nutrition. Maybe it's going to be less carbs, a little bit more fats. You could also try to use some berberine, try to leverage that to help to control blood sugar a little bit. Obviously, it's not going to be the same thing as a GLP-1, but you can get some benefit out of berberine. I think it's a fantastic supplement. So I'd definitely say, though, that it is probably just time for a break, and then give yourself, down the road, 8 weeks or whatever, and then reevaluate. And keep that in mind, because you learned a valuable lesson that, eventually the road runs out. Added Primo 3 weeks ago and upped the carbs and calories by 400 calories, but not seeing an 8-pound swing. Does Primo cause water retention, or is my body not responding to the carbs? Okay. Upped carbs and calories by 400. So 400 is a pretty good amount overall. I generally would increase it by about 40, 50 carbs at a time, and then I would wait to see what happened. And it depends on, like, what did your food look like before? If you're eating 400 more calories, but you're only eating 1,200 calories before, that's a pretty big percentage increase. Regardless though, 400 calories is a good amount. That's a good amount. It's like a couple cups of rice. That's a good amount of carbs to have increased. So going on cycle, you are going to hold more water overall, more glycogen in the muscle. My big question to you is, how does it look? Are you on Primo only? Or let's see, you added Primo 3 weeks ago. Is your Primo real is another question. There's a lot of question right now about Primo. It's harder to source. I'm seeing some people telling me that, my sources still sell Primo and Mast P and Mast D. And it's, all the same prices it's always been. And then I've seen other sources that I know are real legit that have been around a long time. And they're saying, hey, I'm paying more for raw powders now. Guys that have been in this game for 20 years. So in turn, their prices have gone up. If your prices haven't gone up and the availability never shifted at all, I'd be concerned about that, So I would wonder, is it real Primo? But can you gain 8 pounds while increasing calories by 400? Yes. So it could be either of those things, Let's see if we got anything else that I need to hit here real quick. Trend in bodybuilding. Ooh, yikes. That's crazy, Cornelius. Crystal M. We'll just call it that. Huh. Yeah, I've seen people who have said, like, you got to have Adderall, for a prep. I'm like, what? You got to have what? And I never took that before, but they have it like, this is what you need. If you're going to work with me, you have to have this list of things, And I think that there are people out there, like, I think here's the deal is that as bodybuilders, at times we are looking for excuses to take more stuff, and justify it. So, I don't know. Would it work? You could ask, what's his name? Heavy Duty, Mr. Heavy Duty, Mike Mentzer. Would that Crystal M stuff work? I bet you that he would have a lot of experience, and, look where it landed him. Also, Craig Titus was a big fan as well, from what I understood in the news reports. I'm not saying it wouldn't work, you know what I mean? But yeah, I as you could tell, being in my position, I am not going to be a fan. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, what's this say? I heard Chase Irons, he's talking about, that with generics, he got terrible. Oh, yeah. So he got terrible edema from generics. And with Serostim, it was a huge difference for him. I guess everybody is different. Yeah, dude, I'm telling you, man, because then I've worked with, and I think that is going to be more common for some people. And then for others, it doesn't matter. And then yet for others, I'd worked with a guy for several years, and then he got Pharma GH from his doctor, and we're like, oh, this is going to be the year, man. And dude, he bloated up so much, we literally couldn't see any of the detail. Like we were just in like gridlock. We couldn't tell if he was making progress or not because he was so bloated. He just like ballooned out. And it's like, well, are you gaining muscle now? I don't know. Are you getting fatter now? I don't know. So we had to pull it out. And we're like, okay, let's cut this back to, I think 1 unit. We was doing just like 2 units maybe, right? So we cut it back to 1 unit, same thing. We took it all the way out. And then he finally, after a couple of weeks cleared. And then we're like, okay, let's bring it in at a half a unit. And we're like, okay, this is a little messy, but we could deal with it. But is a half a unit really worth it? You know what I mean? So, Cornelius says, a lot of you romanticize pharmaceutical grade for some reason, more special than it actually is. If you saw how it was created, as long as the ingredients are the same as certain standards are kept. Yeah, I'm more or less with what you're saying there, Cornelius. Here's one on methylene blue. If you've tried it. Okay, so here's the deal. I'll keep this quick on methylene blue. It does help to basically rewire the way your body uses oxygen, from what I understand. And so when I've had a more difficult time breathing due to just some autoimmune health stuff that I picked up from getting the virus back 5 years ago, I'm finding now that a very low dose, 5 to 10 milligrams, it does help me to kind of rewire that breathing. Now, I also had looked at some cool stuff from a researcher who was saying everybody thinks they're hacking their bodies and that this is all good. But, if you already are healthy, I don't know if we like hacking your system in the way that it works, thinking that you're going to do a better job than your body already does. You might be in for a rude awakening if you're doing that long term, right? So I found that long-term methylene blue, not for me. It makes me spacey feeling, but intermittently, say on a specific day, like a leg day, when I'm already telling that my oxygen doesn't feel as strong, then I'm finding 5 milligrams is a good place for me. So it's a very specific application, right? All right. Well, listen, I have to get out of here, guys, and I appreciate the heck out of you. You guys are freaking awesome. And once again, if you haven't hit that like button, please do, because I can see right now we got 179 people. This is awesome. And I appreciate you guys being here. And we have 123 likes. So you guys gave me a bunch of likes since I asked you last time. I really appreciate that. And it really is you guys that are helping this channel to grow. I've got to take a break from talking. And then in about an hour, I'm recording 2 episodes with Ron and Dusty today. We're doing an interview with a wheelchair pro bodybuilder, and then we're going to do a regular show too. I think we might be talking a little bit about Nakzilla winning in Prague, right? That's where he won this past weekend. So I'll be excited to get with those guys. They're always a lot of fun to record with. Yeah. I see a few more questions. If I could get to them, I would. And yes, Angry Listener says, hit the like, it's free. It is free. And it's kind of like saying, thank you. It's if I can do something to make you guys, to make your day better, I am grateful to do that. So I appreciate everybody who's done the same for me. And I appreciate the hell out of you guys taking the time to hang out with me here. I'll be honest. You didn't see me do one of these for a little while. I got really busy, as things tend to be. And I do have a few people I need to respond to that want to work with me for coaching. So if you're one of those people, stay tuned and I will get back to you. I don't do massive coaching. Like, I'm not just pumping people through. I like to take my time and enjoy what I'm doing, working with people, and kind of get to know what your day and your life looks like, so that I'm not just throwing a generic plan at you. It takes time to do that. You know what I'm saying? So thanks for bearing with me, and thank you guys for being here. I'll plan to do another one of these sooner than later. I mean, my initial goal was to do one once a month. I'd love to stick to that, but then somebody keeps coming at me when I have the free time. Kuba is like, hey, I want to record another one. I'm like, let's do it. Or VJ is like, hey, I want to record another one. I'm like, okay, let's go. VJ is like 2 weeks out right now, by the way, from his next show. So we should probably get VJ back on. I want to see how he's looking. I mean, I've seen how he's looking, but I want you guys to see how he's looking. And tell us what he's up to. Vijay's always got some crazy training plans or some crazy gear concoction that he's running. I know he has been like dialing it in. Like he's really trying to push hard now that he's going. So anyway, you guys are freaking awesome. And I love doing this. So thank you for being here. And stay tuned for the next one. Stay tuned for a bunch more stuff. We've got a Kuba one in the bank. So I need to edit that and get that out, of course. And then Dave and I will be back next week. Dave couldn't make it this week. His car broke down last week. Him and Rick Collins and I were supposed to record drugs and stuff together. So that didn't happen. I did drugs and stuff on my own. And then I was like, let's just get this out so you guys can see it sooner, see the whole thing on the research chem and peptide situation. But yeah, Dave and I will record and we will be back. So I appreciate you guys. You're freaking awesome. And for another episode here at Think Big, I'll see you soon. Thank you.